Hi, I'm Emma Sutherland. At FX Medicine, we're ready to take your digital experience to the next level, bringing you an enhanced website with the progressive change you've asked for. For our valued community, we want to support you with an engaging online experience that's easier, faster, and simply better with the FX Medicine by BioCeuticals Learning Hub. We'll continue offering leading knowledge from industry experts like myself in natural health care. I'll see you soon at FX Medicine by BioCeuticals.
Welcome to FX Medicine, bringing you the latest in evidence-based, integrative, functional and complementary medicine. I'm Dr Michelle Woolhouse. FX Medicine acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia where we live and work and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to the elders, past and present, and extend this respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people today. Mitochondrial health is a big topic, with implications for conditions such as depression, neurodegeneration, autoimmunity, chronic fatigue, metabolic health and more. Today, I have invited a very special guest from across the other side of the world, a doctor who has made a difference to the landscape of our understanding of mitochondrial health, chronic disease and neuroprotection. She lives it, she breathes it and embodies it. She's an educator, researcher, Instagram influencer, TED talker and practitioner with a fascinating story to share. It's a privilege to welcome to the show Dr. Terry Wahls.
Hey, thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. I just wanted to start by letting our listeners know your incredible story. Could you share your story with us and
Sure.
how you got to where you are now?
So I'm an internal medicine physician by training. And in 2000, out walking with my wife, Jackie, a half mile from home, my left leg grows weak. Dragging it, I hobble home. The next day I see the neurologist who tells me this could be bad or really, really bad. And so when I go through the workup for the next 3 weeks, I think about the fact that for the previous 20 years, I've had episodes of worsening electrical face pain. That was trigeminal neuralgia. And so I'm thinking I have a progressive neurologic disease, and actually I'm hoping for a rapidly fatal diagnosis. And I hear the words multiple sclerosis. I do my research. I find the best MS center in the country here in the United States. I see their best physician. I take the newest drugs. 3 years later, I hear tilt, recline wheelchair.
Oh.
I start taking mitochondrial, a form of chemotherapy. It does not stop the decline. I take Tysabri, the new biologic agent. It does not stop the decline. Now, I'm 48 years old. My son is 11. My daughter's 8. And, I ask myself a really important question. And that is, am I doing all that I can? So I go back to reading the basic science because I had stopped reading the basic science because when I was first diagnosed, it just got me more and more upset when I saw the progressive nature of MS. So now I'm going back to reading the basic science, and I decide that mitochondrial dysfunction is what drives disability, and I will ultimately create a supplement cocktail for my mitochondria, and it helps my fatigue just a little bit, and I'm super grateful.
Yeah.
I'm still declining over the next 4 years. By the summer of 2007, I can no longer sit up in a regular chair. I have a zero gravity chair with my knees higher than my nose. I have one at work, one at home. Fortunately, my mind is still clear, so I'm still staffing the resident clinic. I am a member of the Institutional Review Board reviewing research studies. My chief of staff calls me into the office and tells me he's reassigning me to the traumatic brain injury clinic. He describes what I'll be doing, seeing patients without residents. And I go home, tell Jackie, and she says, you physically can't do that. And I'm like, well, yes, I know. But come January, I'll go to that clinic and either I can do the work or I can't, and then I'll have to apply for a medical disability. And 2 weeks later, in the packet for the research that I'm reviewing is a study using electrical stimulation of muscles in people who are paralyzed, who are never going to walk again.
Right.
So I asked my physical therapist, could I try that? He calls it e-stim. He says it's for athletes. It's really quite painful, but he gives me a test session. It hurts bad, really bad, but when it's over, I feel great. And we add the electrical stimulation of muscles to my little tiny mat exercises that I do before going to work. If I do more than 10 minutes, I can't go to work.
Right.
And then I discovered the Institute for Functional Medicine, and they have a course on neuroprotection, which I order. It's synchronized audio with PowerPoints and a big case of notebook of cases. And so I go through that. I have a longer list of supplements. And then I have this big aha, and I laugh at myself that how long it took to have this aha. What if I redesign my Paleolithic diet that I've been following for 5 years?
Right.
Based on this long list of supplements. And so it's a few more months of figuring out where those nutrients are in the food supply. So now in December 26th, I start this new way of eating, a very structured Paleolithic diet. And for your listeners, I'm so weak I cannot sit up. I can take a few steps using 2 walking sticks. Trigeminal neuralgia is relentlessly more difficult to turn off. And I'm having brain fog, which is probably why my chief of staff, was reassigned me to the traumatic brain injury clinic. So I start this new way of eating December 26, 2007. January comes and I go to the new clinic. The first 2 weeks, I just watch my new partners. The third week, I have to start seeing the patients. And I see patients, I'm writing my notes, I come home and I tell Jack, that wasn't too bad. And then on Friday, so I've done this all week, and Friday I say, honey, I think I can do this. And by the way, could we swap out my zero gravity chair for a regular chair? And I sit up at the table with my family in a regular chair for supper, first time in years. And I realized at the end of the month that I'm a little more clear in my thinking. My energy is a little bit better. And by the end of February, my physical therapist is saying, Terry, you're definitely stronger. He's advancing my exercises. He's having me do the electrical stimulation twice a day. Then it's 15 minutes, then 20 minutes twice a day, then half an hour twice a day. And then I start walking at the hospital with 2 walking sticks, and then with none. And then in May, not even 6 months of this electrical stimulation, new way of eating, I tell my family I want to try riding my bike, which I've not done in 6 years. So we have an emergency family meeting. Jackie tells my 16-year-old son, Zach, you run alongside on the left. My 13-year-old daughter, Zeb, you run alongside on the right, and she'll follow. And I get on my bike, and I bike around the block. And of course, my kids are crying, Jackie's crying, I'm crying. And when I relive that moment, I still cry. That really is the beginning of a big transformation. I will ultimately change how I think about disease and health. It will change the way I practice medicine, and it will change the focus of the research that I do. And so now, 15 years later, I am conducting randomized controlled trials. I'm teaching thousands of clinicians every year. We have a certification program for clinicians, teaching them how to use these concepts in their clinical practice.
So, Terry, what was the difference? You talked about changing your diet kind of early on and looking at functional medicine and mitochondrial protection, a couple of years before that 2007 mark. And then with the combination of electrical stimulation, you mentioned you reshaped your diet. What did that look like?
So, I grew up on a farm, small family farm, ate plenty of vegetables. We had our own livestock. And then being a rebellious teenager, I decided to be a vegetarian. And so then I go off to medical school, and I learned that fat is evil. And so I become a very low-fat vegetarian. And I'm doing that for the next 20 years. Lots of vegetables, lots of legumes, and whole wheat and rice. And then when I'm diagnosed with MS, there's the swank diet. And so I'm pretty close to the swank diet, more the vegetarian version of that, but still a low-fat diet. And then when I start, being focused on, getting neuro care, my neurologist in 2002 introduced me to the Paleolithic diet. And so I read Lauren Cordain's papers and his books. And after a lot of prayer and meditation, I went back to eating meat. So I gave up all grains, all legumes, all dairy. I was still eating eggs. I was eating a lot of meat and vegetables. And I continued to decline. But I was thinking it probably takes a long time to rebuild my brain and my spinal cord. And at least I'm doing something.
Yeah.
And then I started adding supplements when I discovered the Institute. Well, when I started reading the basic science, and I learned that when I take my supplements, my fatigue is less. And so I'm really happy to design a supplement protocol for my mitochondria. And then, I discovered the Institute for Functional Medicine, have a longer list of supplements, which I'm happy to take. But the real magic happens when I redesign my Paleolithic diet in a very specific way.
And what does that look like?
So I have, and we talk about 9 cups of vegetables. Now I'm a tall lady, 6 foot tall.
Wow.
And when I was teaching these concepts, I was teaching them to mostly a male veteran population. So if you're a tall woman or you're a man, it's 9 cups, 3 cups of green leafy vegetables, 3 cups of cabbage, onion, mushroom family vegetables, 3 cups of deeply pigmented vegetables or berries. And that's measured raw. So if you have a dinner plate and you cover it so you can't see the bottom, that's basically 3 cups.
Right. So you're doing that 3 times a day?
3 times a day.
Yeah.
And so it's basically a plate full of vegetables before you have your protein. And it was pretty funny when I was teaching my veteran patients how to improve their diet, and we'd talk about 9 cups of vegetables. They'd say, "Well, Doc, is that per week or per month?"
And you were like, "No, per day."
Per day, yeah. We have a big laugh.
Yeah. So you talk about sulphur. Sulphur is one of your favorite brain healing nutrients, and obviously you mentioned onions and cabbage and those kind of vegetables. Tell us about the role of sulphur in brain healing, and does it play a role in mitochondrial dysfunction as well?
Well, glutathione is a sulfur-containing amino acid that is a master antioxidant in the cell. It will also be very important for making gamma-aminobutyric acid, a calming neurotransmitter. It can be very helpful in the mitochondria for reducing the oxidative stress that happens when you're going through the cytochrome train and the electron transport chain. So it's certainly very helpful. And most of us, we have a very narrow repertoire of vegetables. We're not getting as much organic sulfur. And if we have more in the cabbage family, onion family, mushroom family of vegetables, it will boost our detox pathways. It will boost the intracellular glutathione. It will boost the gamma-aminobutyric acid. And if you have plenty of mushrooms, and they have to be careful, the mushrooms have to be culinary mushrooms because there are poisonous mushrooms that are lethal. Yeah. There are many studies showing that the more servings of mushrooms that you have, the less anxiety, the less depression, the less social anxiety, the less brain fog, the less dementia, mild cognitive impairment.
Yeah.
So in our clinical trials, we've made it, we are certainly recommending that people have mushrooms, some level of mushrooms on a daily basis for that reason.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, they've got such a strong historical use, particularly across the Asian continents as well. And there's so many different varieties of mushrooms. It's quite an exquisite
Absolutely.
culinary addition.
This is something I hadn't realized when I was younger, that we have the plant kingdom, the animal kingdom, and the fungi.
Yeah,
kingdom.
absolutely.
And they're a critical part of the decomposers of the planet. And so, yes.
Yeah, so they help.
Very important nutrient.
Yeah, and they probably help us to decompose what we no longer need as well, So, I mean, they're such a magical kingdom, and so kind of mysterious and secretive. And we're starting to learn so much about the importance of the mushroom kingdom or the fungi kingdom. So it's exciting stuff. Iodine is another one of your favourites, I've heard on the grapevine.
What was that?
Iodine. So
our ancestors would have found seaweed and sea salt to be a really valuable nutrient. And so for the young members of their clan that were trying to have families, they would have been very important to have seaweed and sea salt for the children, the lactating mothers, and members of the clan that were trying to conceive.
And so how does that play a role in brain health, in mitochondrial health? So is iodine about the structure of the brain or more about the cellular
it's
components?
Another essential nutrient. And like many of our nutrients, we have a large U-shaped curve. If you're too low in that nutrient, you have a disease state. If you're too high in that nutrient, you'll have a disease state. And water, for example, we all know that water is an essential nutrient. And if we're too low on water, we become severely dehydrated and we can die of kidney failure. But what people may not also realize is that if we have too much water, we can become water intoxicated and have strokes involving the brainstem and the pons. And so many of us have taken care of people with water intoxication in the intensive care unit during medical school or residency. Iodine, likewise, has a U-shaped curve. If you're too low, you can become hypothyroid. And in fact, it was used to be a common cause of severe mental retardation. That is certainly preventable. And that's why many parts of the world will add iodine to the salt to prevent that low iodine cause of mental retardation. But again, our nutrients have a U-shaped curve. If you are too high in iodine, you can develop a autoimmune thyroid problem as well. And depending on the person, it might lead to excessive thyroiditis, as in Graves' disease, or a autoimmune hypothyroidism.
And that brings it back to the understanding of why diet is so important, because the nutrients are in a structure that are so supportive, and there's so many other benefits, phytonutrients that are not necessarily essential but incredibly important for health as well.
I really encourage the use of foods. Supplements can be very helpful. It can be super helpful to measure nutrient levels, to measure the levels of minerals, vitamins, and correct deficiencies, and then sort out, can you back off on the supplements. If we get our nutrients from food, you're more likely to get things in the appropriate ratios biologically. For example, copper and zinc are uptaken into the cell using the same uptaking transport. If you are low on your zinc, And zinc's very important. It's involved in hundreds of biochemical reactions in the brain. And perhaps you've had zinc spots, so you know that you're low on your zinc. Like, okay, so I'm going to take zinc supplements. And you continue to take them, and you continue to take them. You may eventually over-replace your zinc and create a copper deficiency, which then can lead to neurologic problems as well.
And bone problems as well. Back in medical school, I remember being taught about the function of neurons and neurotransmitters, but very little was mentioned about the importance of glial cells and their functions, the matrix in which these things exist. Can you tell us about the importance of glial cells and why this matrix is so important to nourish as well?
Well, there's been a mapping structure to understand brain structure, brain cell types, and now there are 300 different brain cell types, which we don't even understand what all of these cell types do. The neuron is what transmits the information, perhaps from my cortex down the motor pathways out to my muscles and initiates movement. But along the way, the neurons have to be nourished and supported and protected. So the number of types of glial cells that have specialized roles in how they transport the oxygen, the nutrients, the glucose, the fats, or in the form of ketone bodies, to neurons so they can do the work, that they can support the neuron as it reaches out to the dendrites, to the axons, to the synapses, to the next neuron. And then you have other more specialized glial cells that are actually the various forms of immune cells. And these are various forms of the microglia that are either just inspecting the environment or they have identified a threat and now they're shrinking down and they're generating a bunch of molecules to call in more immune cells to neutralize the threat or dissolve and mop up the damage. Or the immune cell has figured out all the damage has been cleaned up, it's all gone. So now I get a different set of signaling molecules to come in and supervise the rebuilding and the repairing of the tissue.
Oh, so such an important matrix. And also this whole new system, was new to me, called the glymphatics. So the importance of this detoxification of the brain, which is where really basic things like sleep comes in and the importance of nutrients and nourishment of the brain while we sleep so we can allow this glymphatic system to come in and protect our brain from what builds up through the day.
And that's really a new concept. 25 years ago, we had not identified a glymphatic process in the brain. Nor did we recognize that there was this flow of fluid through the brain that could wash out amyloid.
Healthy brainwashing.
Literally brainwashing. And amyloid, amyloid is increased in Alzheimer's and various forms of dementing illnesses. And so there was a belief that amyloid is the cause of dementia. So we've tried a number of drugs to block amyloid, and so far those drugs have been abysmal failures. There's more appreciation that amyloid is made in response to an infection or damage that we've had, damage to the cell types. And the amyloid is sort of like a sticky flypaper to attract the debris, attract the bacterial fragments. And then if you have effective brainwashing, your body is removing the amyloid away. So the amyloid, there are more of us who are thinking amyloid is not the problem.
It's the
Amyloid is
protector.
part of the solution.
Yeah.
And the accumulation of amyloid is that we are not having an effective brainwashing cycle.
Yeah.
And of course, that we now recognize is in part due to sleep, inadequate amounts of deep sleep, shortened sleep, poor sleep, posture, more hypoxia during the night, sleep apnea.
Yeah, makes sense.
And I'd sort of like to comment on the issue of sleep and sleep apnea. We radically changed how we eat. For thousands of years, we breastfed our infants for a very long time, and then the infants ate what the adults ate. So as they got their teeth, they would be eating tough, chewy foods like the adults were eating.
Yeah.
Tough, chewy food. And as we developed societies, particularly in the last 300 years when we developed an industrial food supply with white flour and white sugar and ever more processed foods, ever more flour-based foods, and the food industry got a advantage for creating food products that were sweet, tasty. Our children began having less chewy food and more soft food. And there was less breastfeeding. The result of that is that the face became more narrow, the mandible is more narrow, the maxilla is more narrow, the tongue, instead of being forward into the mouth with a broad face, is pushed back into the throat. And so the airway is smaller. And then to make matters worse, now we have crooked teeth. Primitive societies have straight teeth. There's plenty of room for all of their teeth. Modern society, there's a lot of crooked teeth, very crooked teeth. And our dentists are trying to help us out to give us braces, and they put these wires around our teeth, and they squeeze them together more narrow. And you might pull teeth, so now the face becomes narrower still, and the airway becomes smaller. So now we have higher rates of sleep apnea and not enough oxygen during the night, which, terrible strain on our brains.
That's right. So, I mean, all of that is just, really good science. And also then you add obesity into that and metabolic dysfunction and the deluge of very, very poor, highly processed foods into the equation. And it's a disaster for many people. You mentioned Professor Lauren Cordain, one of the leading researchers into the Paleolithic diet and Paleolithic lifestyle. And he was very big on trying to get people to understand about these recommended daily intakes and how vastly erroneous they can be. And we've based a lot of our medicine on RDIs, the recommended daily intakes. Can you explain how his work influenced your early choices in that journey and how you came about understanding the limitations of the RDI?
Well, those nutrients were what we could first identify about, I think, 90 years ago, based on our technologies. And there were 12 to 19 nutrients that were measured. And so we identified the lower limits in which you have disease, upper limits in which you have disease. And we would ultimately create diet recommendations based on these nutrients. We never really looked at what was the optimal nutrition in what would be the actual nutrient intake. So we've never known. And I believe Lauren Cordain looked at some primate studies that tried to measure what was the optimal intake of the nutrients for primates living in the wild, which I think is a very interesting question. or what is the intake of these nutrients from a traditional society that's living and following their traditional diets, whether it is the Maasai, who have basically a carnivore diet, or some of the other societies that have a mix of plants and animals. So we don't know what is the optimal diet that humans evolved and had great reproductive success in a wide variety of environments.
I just wanted to take you back to, you spoke about how you came into this diagnosis being a low-fat vegetarian.
Yeah.
And Dr. Swank, who was an American neurologist back in 1949, wrote a book to advise his MS patients to reduce saturated fats around the time where you mentioned also fats were demonized, and they've continued to be demonized. And certainly, you know, it's still a myth where we're all trying to kind of bust out of. How does the Swank diet differ from what you propose? And what's your thoughts on saturated fats? Because I'd love to hear your take on that kind of fat debate and
Well, and I'll comment, George Jelinek is a huge proponent of the swank diet in overcoming MS, and he's done very, very well. And we did a clinical trial comparing the swank diet and the modified Paleolithic diet, or the Wahls diet. And we found that both diets were very helpful compared to the usual diet.
Right.
The Wahls diet was better than swank for many, but not all of the measures. And there are other studies that have looked at the Mediterranean diet. They found that to be helpful. The ketogenic diet has been helpful. In a network meta-analysis that looked at 12 studies, Mediterranean, swank, modified Paleolithic, anti-inflammation, ketogenic, intermittent fasting, calorie restriction, and usual diet. The diet with the largest effect size was the modified Paleolithic.
Right.
The next, and it was twice as effective as the Mediterranean diet, and again, about twice as effective as the low-fat diet. All these diets are way better than the standard westernized diet.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
100%.
And I want to be clear that whatever you can do to improve your diet, more vegetables, sufficient protein, will be a huge step forward.
Yeah.
And depending on your clinical circumstances, I may tell you that, yes, a low saturated fat diet would be preferable, and we'll put you on a modified Paleolithic diet in the low saturated fat version. Because I'd rather your cholesterol stay 225 to 200. That's sort of my sweet spot. If you already have known heart disease, yes, I'll have it be lower. If you come to me and your cholesterol is 275, I'll put you on a low saturated fat diet. But I'll still put you on I'll encourage you to do the modified paleo diet, and I'll encourage you to use a lot of olive oil cold, and that you could bake, roast, or boil your meats and your food, put them in broth, and add olive oil cold. I don't like to have people cook their olive oil, because when you cook the olive oil, you destroy this really wonderful polyphenol called hydroxytyrosol. As soon as it gets to 180 degrees, you destroy some of these really great antioxidants in the olive oil. So better to add it cold afterwards. So if you watch me on Instagram, you see that I have lots of pesto. I pour pesto over my vegetables. I pour pesto over my meats. I use lots and lots of olive oil, but I use it cold.
Beautiful. It's delicious anyway, so it's a good recommendation. But I wanted to switch you to, obviously with your personal experience, MS and brain support is such a significant part of your research. But you also, what I loved, you talk so much about the other qualities. So not so much the disease process, but also aspects of things like quality of life, cognition, mood, fatigue, the vaguer, more subtle kind of things, but the things that actually make a difference to the human. Tell us about your research and about these kind of almost secondary signs of MS.
Well, what I saw in my clinical practice when I was taking care of veterans with traumatic brain injury and in primary care and in my clinical trials is that reductions in fatigue, improvement in mood, so less anxiety, less depression, less brain fog. People would tell us they could feel the difference sometimes as early as a month, but very often within 3 months. We'd pick up a few more at 6 months, and really about 75% of the folks would within 6 months have reduced anxiety, better energy, and they're beginning to have better improvement with their walking endurance. It takes longer for changes in motor function to occur with gait. In our trials, in my clinical practice, that can often take 9 to 12 months. You have to improve your diet, yes, but we also have to work with people to improve their exercise programs and work with physical therapy.
Yeah. And you mentioned also that electrical stimulation therapy. There's the more advanced technologies that can support that too. Yeah.
And I was the first one to research that in MS. Now there are more researchers that in people who have severe disability, who are walker dependent, scooter dependent, can have really significant improvement by adding electrical stimulation of muscles. It will take time. This is not a quick fix, but for the first time, people are getting stronger. And the other thing that we want to point out is by adding electrical stimulation of muscles, we're greatly reducing the harm of inactivity.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to draw your attention, back to vitamin D. We know that, MS is predominant in colder climates. So, parts of Canada and Scotland and lower parts of Australia and across the world. What is your, I guess, research telling us about the role of vitamin D and other fat-soluble vitamins for that matter, such as vitamin K? And what levels do you aim for, in your research?
I want people to have their vitamin D in the top half of the reference range for the lab. I also want them to get a tan. So we know that vitamin D levels, when they're high, are associated with better outcomes.
Yeah.
We also know that supplements with no other change doesn't change a thing.
Right.
Is that because you needed the vitamin K, you needed calcium, you needed magnesium, you needed a better diet, you needed to exercise? Is it because the light, in addition to affecting your vitamin D levels, will also affect your immune cell function? I think it's probably all of that. I think you got to fix your diet. You want to have vitamin K, you want to have calcium, magnesium, vitamin A, retinol, and you want to have sunlight. So I have my people take a vitamin D plus vitamin K supplement. I tell them, please get us a tan, don't burn, but I want you to have a nice deep dark tan because that's going to affect your immune cells, and have a really great diet. If you have lots of greens, you'll get calcium and magnesium.
Yeah, awesome. And coenzyme Q10, has got some great research in terms of fatigue. Is that part of your supplement?
Yes. So sort of the basic thing I really like to have people take care of, vitamin D plus vitamin K, a B complex, preferably with some activated Bs, a fish oil, coenzyme Q. That's a very basic sort of supplement cocktail that can be very helpful. And depending on the circumstances, I may add some additional supplements, but that's a nice basic support in addition to eating plenty of protein and 9 cups of vegetables and fruit if you're a big gal like me or a man, 6 cups if you're a more petite lady.
No, it's just so well-rounded, that advice. It just makes so much sense on you don't even have to be a scientist to kind of understand the sense-making aspect of all of that. But I was interested, actually, as I was researching this interview for you, and this is what frustrates me, and I really want to get your take on it. But in a 2020 Cochrane review, they looked at over 40 different papers on diet, antioxidants, unsaturated fat levels, concluded there was insufficient evidence to prescribe these interventions for people with MS. I'd love to hear your appraisal.
The Cochrane reviews are always very, very circumspect. They rarely recommend anything. They always say there's insufficient evidence. So that's what they're going to say. And they'll say that we need more research. We'll never have a study that says there's one correct diet.
Yeah, I
There's
know.
one terrible diet. That's the standard westernized diet.
Exactly.
And then there are all these other diets that, depending on the clinical circumstances, I might say, you have type 2 diabetes, you're severely obese. Are you open to do a ketogenic diet? Because that would be really the best way to improve your insulin sensitivity. Or you might have severely high cholesterol. So I'm going to put you on a low saturated fat Paleolithic diet, or it might put you on a Mediterranean diet because you're going to tell me, you know what, my family's not going to go for a Paleolithic diet, but I think I could get them to a Mediterranean diet. So there are many diets that will be helpful. I don't think there's ever going to be one diet that is the correct diet. And anyone who studies diet, we have to define the diet that we're studying. So there are many different diet studies that are out there. Humans, we originated in equatorial Africa. We've gone all over the world in many different ecosystems, eating a wide variety of foods.
Yeah.
It is foolish for us to say there's going to be one correct diet. And anyone who says that, stop listening to them.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, it's common. It's many of it is common sense, and also the beautiful thing about prescribing, diets and even supplements, with some education behind it, they are incredibly safe, interventions. Particularly, you listed a cocktail of biologics and chemotherapy, right at the start of the conversation. I mean, these medications require a lot of.
Medications may be very helpful at turning off the disease activity.
Yeah.
But you can talk to your patients about, we want to improve your diet. And there are a number of diets that would be very helpful to you. Then you can have a clinical conversation about which diets you think would be most helpful, and then which diets are they and their family most open to trying.
I think that's incredibly sensible. But it isn't all about diet, is it? I mean, you talk, even talking to you, I can hear, your mindset and your intelligence and your well-rounded, holistic approach to life, your connection, your social connection to your family, your relationship. Your book covers the research. Yeah, tell us about, what else you did in terms of mindset, meditation, exercise, time in nature, how all these factors affect mitochondrial health and brain immunity.
We need to have a reason to do the work because changing our diet, changing our daily routine takes some effort. And so one of the first questions I like to ask is, if your home was beginning to have smoke rolling out of the window, is there someone or something you care so much about that you would rush in to save? And usually it's a child, grandchild, spouse, parent. Occasionally it's a cat or a dog. Occasionally it's a precious family heirloom. And then I can ask, now if your health could improve a little bit, what would you like to be doing with that person or with your dog that you can't do now? And now we have a purpose and a reason. And then my follow-up question is, okay, so now we're going to begin to work on improving your diet and or your self-care. What domain do you want to work on first? Diet, sleep, stress, exercise? We could do it all at once, but most of my patients do better if we just pick one simple domain first. And a simple act that you can master will get that tuned up for you. Then we could take on a next action. So you want to set people up for success.
Yeah,
absolutely.
You
want to have them visualize something that matters to their heart. So, like, I'd like to get on the floor to play with my grandchildren again. Or I want to walk my son or daughter down the aisle at their wedding. Like, oh my God, I am so excited when that is the goal. Because that speaks to their heart so deeply.
And it's also beautiful to have that forward focus as well, so they can actually see it happening. And that creative visualization just is so meaningful because the brain responds to that like it's in real time, which is also the magic of that mind-body connection as well. Now, I've got another question for you, Dr. Wahls. You are a big advocate for organ meat, and that often sends people running to the hills. If some
delicious.
Yeah, I know. I've watched a couple of your videos, and I can do liver, I can do heart. I'm just working on the other ones. If someone if someone can't tolerate them, does that blow the modified paleo diet out?
Gosh.
Yeah.
Heart is really easy. It's sort of like a nice steak. Tongue is really easy. That's a lovely steak. Oysters, clam, mussels, often that can be easier. You could also do organ meat capsules. That would be good. You could take liver, chop it up, and grind it in with your ground meat. So like a 10% liver and 90% ground meat. And then if you make that into a chili or sort of a spicy sausage, that works really well.
Perfect. So that's easy enough. And I think we've got to get it away from the only meat that we eat is the mussel. So I didn't realise mussels and oysters were organ meats, but that means I'm an organ meat eater. So that's good news too. Yeah. Awesome.
And if you have more bone broth, that gives you a more balanced amino acid production. So, and again, our ancestors ate nose to tail. We discard 30% of the carcass.
Yeah.
We would, our ancestors would never have done that.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. We could go on and on. It was such a privilege to listen to someone who not only researches this, but who lives it and breathes it and really knows it in your heart.
Well, can I do a couple of pitches? I want people to go follow me on my Instagram at Dr. Terry Wahls. Get to see what I'm eating and doing. That's pretty fun. And if people go to my website, terrywahls.com, and be sure to sign up for the email.
Oh, fantastic. It's just around the corner. And we will also put that on our social media as well. So, it'll be great to get this message out. And I just want to really finish by just honouring your courage and your conviction, and really just to acknowledge that stories like yours that, really warm our heart and bring clarity and inspiration to the field of medicine. So thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Thank you everyone for listening today. Don't forget that you can find all the show notes, transcripts and other resources from today's episode on the FX Medicine website. I'm Dr. Michelle Woolhouse, and thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
This podcast is intended as healthcare practitioner education only, and it is not a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment.
Make sure you never miss an FX Medicine episode by subscribing to us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You can also follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram.